Hello and welcome to another Warcraft 3 audio commentary. This is going to be a 4v4 game, and in this replay I'm going to be playing random. I draw undead, and I'm going to be doing a fiend build to start, sort of the standard Crypt Graveyard Altar Ziggurat build. We've got one undead, one human, and one human ally, so we are lacking elf and orc, it seems. We've got double undead, and the humans are the ones on the edge, so that is slightly unfortunate. It's probably going to be sort of questionable which race does better as like an edge spawn player. Typically undead's bases are seen to be a little bit more sort of difficult to rush in and attack sometimes, especially if they get in Rubian Tower. But that's not always necessarily the case. I mean, if a human builds an arcane tower and they're reasonably good at micro with militia and whatnot, human bases can be pretty sort of sticky and tricky to go into as well. It really depends on what the players do. Again, if an undead base does not have a Nerubian Tower or a Spirit Tower, or a Halls of the Dead or a Black Citadel that's not upgrading, because it doesn't actually attack the Black Citadel and the Halls of the Dead when they are finished sort of upgrading to their next tier. They have an attack, but if the tier 2 to tier 3, they of course are not attacking. So, but yeah, if the undead doesn't have any of that stuff, their base is fairly vulnerable. They only have 5 acolytes. They tend to have only maybe a few ghouls, 2 to 4 generally. So, if you kill some acolytes during attack, it's fairly annoying. Whereas the human just has more workers to attack, perhaps. And again, an arcane tower is not as bad as a Nerubian Tower in terms of slowing things down and making it hard for that unit or hero to escape, for sure. But it's just a little different. So, but anyway, I'm going to go for a Lich here, which is not really standard, though. Again, I've had some success in the past doing a Lich, though generally before, when I would do the Lich first as a hero, I would be going ghouls straight into Mass Frostworms, which, again, is a pretty good combination in a lot of circumstances because of the slow and the AoE sort of effect of Frost Nova and the Frostworm's breath, and the high DPS in the range aspect. So it's it's generally pretty decent. Again, Nova as an anti-air ability, sort of the counter to what counters or a lot of things that counter Frostworms is pretty good. Like Frost Nova against clumped together Wind Riders, Gargoyles, Hippogriff Riders. Not so much Bat Riders, since they are going to generally use Concoction against Frostworm. So if you can't kill them instantly and they go ahead and explode, well, you're really just wasting Nova in that sort of aspect on Bat Riders generally. But it's different if you have Fiends with Web, but if you don't, again. But anyway, so generally, again, like as usual in 4s, a lot of players like to try to expand quick. We've got green, who looks like he's going to try to expand. It looks like yellow is flirting for some reason with an attack, but he's not doing it. I don't know if his teammates were like not on board and he was going to try to do that. I don't know where blue is. Oh, there's blue. Okay, so blue is a demon hunter, a bunch of archers. Yellow is a paladin, a bunch of footmen. This is a pretty decent combination if they fight together with reasonable positioning. The two heroes can tank a lot. The paladin will allow the demon hunter to being able to heal is pretty good. They catch pink creeping a green camp randomly, and this is actually terrible for pink because the demon hunter, well, luckily for us, the demon hunter has immolation, which is a pretty poor skill. Mana burn would have been much more annoying for pink to deal with. Looks like yellow will, yeah. They do kill 2 fiends though, so that was actually really bad. I was going to try to run up there and help him, so that actually went very poorly because I took like 2 volleys from the archers, didn't really engage. They've just got more units than us, Purple is expanding, so actually just distracting them is actually a fairly useful thing. I wasn't totally aware of what all was going on, but I do generally know, and again, I saw the guy use immolation, I think, so I wasn't too worried about getting mana burned here. But I do need to be careful because the Demon Hunter is very fast. The Paladin is very strong offensively against undead, of course. Wow, they've got a speed scroll even, and I go ahead and Dark Ritual that fiend just so he doesn't kill it. Orange has got a Shadow Hunter, so they're all being very aggressive. The good news here for us, though, is did he get Cluster Rockets? Cluster Rockets is a terrible spell, honestly. Even with the buff, Cluster Rockets is not really a viable skill, honestly. It doesn't, unless you can get like level 2 and 3, but really, I mean, to get that, you're going to have to be very high level. That's really stupid pathing right there. But anyway, their rush is going to do some serious damage. At this point, I was a little bit concerned. But the good news is Pink is tier 2, so he does have the Halls of Dead getting some shots in. He can... we're on our side of the map, so reinforcements should be showing up for us. The other thing is, Orange actually fast-tagged. He did not get any grunts. So his part of his contribution to this rush, while not terrible, from the Shadow Hunter, is not really enough to just power through this base and beat us in the middle of the base. Purple? Is blue on it? No, blue's not. I'm very confused. Oh, blue is hidden. He's Shadow Melon. So this is a bit silly. But yeah, the thing was, Orange didn't really offer anything there. I don't know if Teal was even with them in that rush. I don't think he was. So that's the real big problem. If it was Teal instead of Orange there with them, that would have been a much more dangerous situation because we've got, Purple's got a pretty decent army. I got pretty much dominated there because we were so outnumbered and I didn't have Death Coil to heal stuff, so any damage was pretty much not going to get healed up from us. So in the meantime, Pink had a terrible hero, well, not a terrible hero choice, but a terrible hero skill choice with Cluster Rockets. Well, that was really bad that I lost that Fiend there. But so yeah, this game is not going well in the early game for us. But like I said, the good news is Orange was really hard teching to Shaman. So not exactly the most scary unit they could tech to, honestly. I'm not really a big fan of Shaman, whatever, because it seems so, like, for one thing, the Bloodlust is out of all of the honestly, out of all the master level spells, it doesn't seem like the strongest one. As far as cost efficiency and everything, it's not terrible. It's just that when you compare it to some of the other master level abilities, you're comparing it to Cyclone, Polymorph, Cripple, Possess, Inner Fire. Stacks up okay with Inner Fire, honestly. I put like Inner Fire and Bloodlust as like the bottom tier of master level abilities. I'd much rather have Polymorph or Cyclone. Cripple is probably really close as well, just because the mana cost is so crazy. But again, Cripple's impact is much greater than Bloodlust. Now, it does cost less, so there's that. But, but yeah, Shaman have situational uses. It's just, I don't think their impact, Healing Wards is another master level ability. So yeah, that's really what you're looking at, and Heal Ward scales just so much better. I guess Revive is kind of like, it doesn't really have the same impact either. It's sort of reactive. You've got to go Torrents to really take advantage of that. So not exactly the best there either. But people may disagree, but I just generally not the biggest fan of Shaman. I guess Bloodlust it does have its uses though, assuming they don't get Dispel. It's it's like the opposite of Slow though. That's sort of the other part of it. Like, to me, it seems like it is about as effective as Slow from the sorceresses, and Slow is an initiate level spell. So while in some sense, of course, it does increase the attack rate of units more than slow decreases it. Um, it's, when you compare it to something like Polymorph, and again, Polymorph does cost more mana, but Polymorph reduces the damage output to 0 for things, and it makes the unit slower. So it actually is Polymorph is actually not only insanely powerful, and again, I would put it as like maybe the top level, master level ability for casters, but it is, it counters Bloodlust, like completely counters it. I don't care if you have Bloodlust on your units. Well, it counters it on units, I should say. I don't care if you have Bloodlusted units. If I Polymorph, I just Polymorph them, and it completely nullifies Bloodlust. So that's, sort of what I'd say about it. And as far as healing wards go, if you've got a massive army, and assuming they don't cancel the heal wards or dispel them or whatever, same with assuming that they don't sort of dispel Bloodlust, healing wards has a much greater sort of impact than Bloodlust does for, less mana. You can cast like 1 or 2 heal wards, and it's going to cost you, X mana. Whereas you have to Bloodlust your whole army to even try to keep up with that amount of damage output, and you probably may still not be able to do it because I don't know. I would need to look at like the DPS versus like healing. You get like 2% healing from a heal ward, and then you get was it 40% extra attack speed. So you're comparing different numbers. Let's see, it'd be like 40% for a fiend here. 40% of, what was that, 33 average DPS here. So probably somewhere around 17, 16, 15, something like that damage. 2% of 550 is going to be, it's going to be slightly less for sure, but it's for every single unit. So, one heal ward can hit a whole bunch of units, whereas Bloodlust is only going on the DPS of one thing. So, and again, of course, the ratios are different. Every unit has different, like, units have different hit points and damage. So when you're comparing, like, a Fiend versus a Mountain Giant, obviously the Mountain Giant will benefit more from a heal ward. Probably Taurens, Grunts, things like that, more tanking units with lower DPS, obviously get more use out of heal wards. And then Bloodlust, of course, for like glass cannon type units are going to be more preferable. So, but yeah, this game is mostly going to be over here. But we didn't actually ever counter Blood. Pink was actually, what was I doing here? I'm not exactly sure what I was doing just there. But yeah, I'm going to join up with Pink here, and he's going to turn around and fight. He's using cluster rockets. I guess with the upgrade where the cluster rockets will hit air units, it's a little bit better. I still don't think it's as good as like Pocket Factory in the early game. Like, you can level up a lot easier with Pocket Factory in the early and mid game. That'll be the preference. In the late game, maybe it's just too many units where Pocket Factory, and again, a lot of magic damage units, Pocket Factory might not be as attractive there, but I still think it is pretty strong. Like, as you level up Pocket Factory in the engineering upgrade, it gets incredibly strong if they don't actually attack it. Now, if you're against mass air armies, that's a different story. You're not going to do really well dropping Pocket Factory against like mass griffins and whatnot due to the change and just the way it works. But if you like attack bases and stuff, the Tinker is going to, late game, if they don't have some way to instantly deal with Pocket Factory, like if they leave you sort of leave a base undefended for something like 20 seconds against a level 5 Tinker, that is most likely going to be a recipe for just utter devastation. Because Pocket Factory, its damage output is actually, the potential at least, is incredible. Kind of like Blizzard. Blizzard, has a really high sort of potential damage if you just get to sit there and cast Blizzard for 75 mana and get a full, say against a whole army of units or heroes. The potential is really amazing. The problem with sort of both of those abilities, though, is, the problem with Pocket Factory is it's stationary, and if they destroy the Pocket Factory, the damage is, like a channeling spell, the damage is not instant. So it's going to take a while to get that full impact, and they can counter it. Now, with both, they can just run away from the Pocket Factory generally, or they can just run away from Blizzard. And so yeah, if you want to look through the score screen here, lots of hero kills there. Not really as many unit kills, though I did top out the score screen at 39. But yeah, these heroes are pretty dangerous together. Fork Lightning, Nova Coil, Frost Arrow, Unholy Aura to run faster. And again, I went for Frost Worms to sort of double down on the whole, nuking aspect of it. But yeah, that was, a pretty sort of dicey early game. Though the problem with their strategy, again, if I was going to sort of describe it or sort of guess at what it was, is, if you don't get enough of a benefit from the rush, I would say the rush did reasonably well. Though it does involve running across the map and chasing players, generally chasing players if you chase them into their own base. It sets up a natural advantage for the defender generally. Their base has to be really bad for it not to be some kind of advantage, even if it's just fighting on their side of the map, near their crypt, near their shop, even just standing on Blight. That is an advantage for them. Being further away from, obviously, your production buildings is going to be a disadvantage. Now there, excuse me, there are ways to, of course, mitigate that disadvantage. One way is to have all your players together attack a single base or a single player, sort of as a surprise. And the way that can be pretty strong is you know where you're going to attack. Unless the enemy is doing perfect scouting, and in the early game, especially in a forced random team context, it's assuming you're not against a map hacker or something like that, the enemy is just not going to be that aware. And again, it's really hard when you have few units and few options, like you don't have shades or sentry wards. You generally aren't going to have Scout Owl available that early for hunts or Priest of the Moon or whatever. You just don't have as many units out there. You don't have expansions. You're not like running around the middle of the map generally. It's really hard to scout that early in the game. The whole map, sort of, not that you ever can really scout the whole map very easily, but to scout enough to where you can see an attack like that coming. Now, if you see multiple armies running together, obviously you can infer some things. But a lot of times you will just miss that. If like if a bunch of opponents meet somewhere and go to a base, a lot of times you will not be prepared for that, and you'll just have to react to it. So, they know where they're going to attack if they communicate well and sort of play competently, whereas you don't exactly know where they're going to defend. So they can pick a base to attack that is sort of the most vulnerable. They're going to have to scout to really do that and have a decent knowledge of the game, of course. But if they do have somebody with that kind of knowledge or scouting, they can pick a vulnerable base that's not going to be as much of an advantage to fight on, or they can pick a vulnerable army that's like out in the open and pick on them. So that will mitigate some of the problems of attacking into a disadvantage. And again, if you all show up together and the map is large and the scout or the spawn points are not particularly close on certain maps, then they might have to town portal in a reaction. You can back up, and you just cost them, maybe 1 or 2 town portals. Maybe they didn't town portal, and you just have a numbers advantage. Maybe you caught somebody, you rushed, and one of the players was fast teching. Maybe one of the players was aggressively creeping something. They've dumped a bunch of money into a fast expansion, like actually was the case in the last game. You give yourself a chance to have some kind of advantage. Like, okay, they've taken a bunch of damage from the creeps. Let's hit before they can heal. Let's hit before that expansion pays off, etc., etc. Let's hit before the tech happens, The bad news about the rushers in the last game, they had a player that was fast teching, so his strategy did not have good synergy with what they did. And again, Teal didn't join either, so you really have to sort of, and again, it's like trying to herd cats sometimes in Force Random Team, trying to get players to do any sort of coherent, or not coherent, but like cohesive set of strategies or whatever. So that's, going to go I got it's going to sort of, you know, depend on what kind of coordination you can get from your allies. But anyway, in this game I'm going to be fast expanding with a Mountain King and Footman. I've got nearby a Orc player who does have a barracks. He didn't skip barracks. Red's base is completely open. It's really just terrible. I mean, it might maybe look aesthetically to somebody not really skilled at the game of Warcraft, might look fine. You know, oh, I've got all these farms together. You know, I've got plenty of open space, but you don't really want the base totally open for human, just in general. Human workers and stuff are just too vulnerable. Like with Elf, you know, you can maybe have an open base because you can detonate, you can use moon wells, you can shift wisps in and out of an entangled gold mine. The gold wisps are pretty much completely safe most of the time in the entangled gold mine unless they destroy that. So you know, you're just going to be much less, and you've got Ancients of War typically and a Tree of Life to maybe attack stuff. So natural sort of base defense there. I'm going to be, after I expand, I'm going to be scouting for an opposing expansion, hoping to get lucky. And you're going to see that Teal is going to be totally wide open. No towers actually there, so that's good news for me. He did finish it before I got there, which is somewhat unfortunate. And my units are damaged. It would have been nice if I used a regen scroll before I went up here. Probably could have. I don't remember the timing exactly, but yeah, just imagine these footmen were all full hit points. Probably would be preferable, of course. Though this untowered base, not a threat at all, untowered expansion to these footmen. So they're going to have to come deal with this if they want to stop me from wrecking these workers. And again, they just really, in terms of speed, they're not going to be able to get there to stop me from killing most of them. So let's say town portal maybe, but they're not going to do that. So I kill every worker here. That's 5 workers. 150 for every 2, or 75 for 1. So 375 gold just down for them. And in terms of experience, 25. Is it 25? I think it's 25 experience per worker. I send 1 footman to go scout some other expansions. Again, I'm basically when they town portal here. I think Teal town portal, or did he? Or did purple? Purple maybe town portal. But anyway, yeah, they come here to defend, and they are going to pop off a couple of footmen. Teal does get level 3, so that's pretty good. But I just decided I'm going to try to run. They didn't bolt my Mountain King. I do have a town portal if I need it. But they didn't bolt my Mountain King, so I'm like, well, I'm just going to eat these footman losses. I mean, as far as later in the game, the footmen probably are not going to be amazing anyway. They were already damaged. So, and I did get 1 footman out to scout. I'm going to see another expansion here. Be a little bit annoying with this footman. Yellow is going to be sort of joining the footman, luckily. So this is actually pretty decent teamwork here. I don't know if we're going to get to cancel this. We're certainly going to be annoying. I'm going to circle back and actually go back to Teal's expansion, because if he doesn't have towers here, I can still be very, very annoying with this Mountain King. Even though I've only got about 100 mana coming up, it looks like yeah, Yellow will get to either cancel or destroy this. If Pink's smart, he will cancel it for sure. Wow, he let it finish. That was just bonkers. And then he left the game. So that, you know, really bad news for him. I've actually used Thunderclap here. Thunderclap does a lot of damage. Like the damage potential if you hit multiple units is going to be higher. So I just went for maximizing damage, not killing single targets. Specifically here, Stormbolt, of course, focuses more damage onto a single target. But I want to try to get as many kills here as I can. And I still should be able to kill at least 1 target, so 1 peasant. So he's going to come back. He does have enough mana to Stormbolt me. He probably, I assume, will Stormbolt me. He goes ahead and does it. He gets us around with the rifles. And I'm going to town portal. And I've got this footman. I'm trying not to lose. He kills it anyway. That was sad. But, so yeah, I was, you know, I forced Teal to defend here more. Pink lost his expansion. He could have canceled it and saved like half the resources here. But, anyway, we've got Purple attacking by himself with Headhunters. This is a bit of a weird, you don't really see this. They did buff Headhunters a little bit, but this is sort of a weird army, I guess. It's not terrible. I'll say against archers, the Farseer is very strong. The Headhunter is not going to be amazing. Grunts would have been more effective against the archers. But, well, green really needs to use that rejuve potion and replenishment potion. But red joins up. And green does have 2 heroes. What are you doing? Use the replenishment potion. It's like the perfect situation to use that replenishment potion. I have no clue what he's doing. He's just gonna dump all of his mana from the Moonwells. There's no reason for that. That thing gives you 200 hit points and 75 mana. Like, that is an ideal thing to have. He just drains all the Moonwells. So not what I would have done, but at any rate, not really going to make the big difference here. So I've decided to go for mass range, mass mortars. Again, not going for armor range first really sort of limits me in terms of my going for mass casters. If I don't have Brilliance Aura, it's not going to be nearly as scary having mass casters. So I decided just to go for the dwarf route. You know, you got mortar teams, flying machines, siege engines. It's definitely sort of a dwarf, sort of mechanical theme type, strategy, and riflemen as well, which are dwarves. But anyway, I think it will be a reasonably strong strategy against a bunch of ground units, which they seem to be doing. Also, it allows me to put pressure on bases relatively well, even though I can't remember how well we actually do that here, but we'll see. But anyway, I'm looking at the mini map and looking at the situation. I'm thinking, okay, what do I need to do? I've got a handful of units here, a couple rifles, 3 mortars, gonna be 4 mortars and 3 rifles here. What can I really do here? I probably should have scouted this for sure with my army. Could have did that at any point, even with just 1 rifleman. That would have been useful, or even a militia. But yeah, I'm sort of waiting till I have enough mortars to really put a lot of pressure on them. The other thing about mortars and rifles is they share attack upgrades, so that's very useful. The synergy there, the cost efficiency should be pretty good. Blue's base is somewhat wide open. I'm going to try to pick this shop off because it's like closest to the edge, and it's got only 500 hit points. The next target probably would have been the stronghold if his army wasn't here, but he is there, so I'm going to back up. Again, the stronghold and now the fortress. 22,000 hit points and then 2,500 hit points. I don't really have enough mortars to knock that down very easily, even with 2 attack upgrades. I'm going to need, especially if he repairs, I'm going to need some time to knock that down. So while it is very juicy, my army cannot stand in and fight really anything they've got by itself, especially like these wolves, grunts. He's just going to slaughter me if I go in there. So I need to pick a target that's far away from wherever they are. So I'm going to swing up here and actually hit teal. And I think if looking at the replay bar here, it looks like what's going to happen is they're going to try to counter, and they've got a bunch of riflemen and casters. Blue's got a bunch of grunts. They're just sitting there, some raiders. But really, I think what happens here is, okay, teal town portals, and green has joined me with his level 5 True Shot Aura, level 5 Priestess. This is terrible. He TP's in. Sadly, he probably didn't know green was coming up. He TP's into a 1 versus 2. Purple comes behind me with a couple of sort of beastly dire wolves, and he is going to slaughter these mortars, like I said. And here's the bad news is I don't actually kill this. I don't think he master repairs it with just enough workers to save it at like 76 hit points. So, FML as it were. So yeah, that was really sad. I did force a bunch of town portals, but I lost like all the mortar teams. Now we did pretty much obliterate Teal. Well, we killed Teal's hero. I don't know if we killed a lot of his units there, but in the meantime, I town portaled back to my main base. I should have actually killed the Arcane Vault first. One strategy that you should maybe look into, and I don't actually do it enough, honestly. I do it sometimes, but killing a shop when you're doing a rush like this can really put them in trouble if they're all going to town portal to a base, because without a shop on certain maps, especially this one, it's going to be sort of far away to get to a neutral race shop, And if they all town portal here and they need another, if they town portal, they're going to need another town portal to, if say an attack comes on the other side of the map or something. So like right here, we knocked out their shop. Blue doesn't have a town portal. Did anybody else? Nobody else town portal there to defend, so that was bad news. So now I'm just going to TP up to yellow's base, and I'm just going to hit the top. Like, I'm just going to ping pong back and forth with this mass siege strategy and force them to try to defend everything without town portals. If we look at purple, he doesn't have a town portal here. I don't know if that was specifically because we destroyed the shop or he just decided not to. But yeah, this is a strategy that I think is legit, and it's not very hard to execute. Like, you look at a Voodoo Lounge, it has 500 hit points. If you have mass siege, it doesn't take very many sort of volleys to knock out a shop. Now, the downside is if you knock the shop out first, you do give them a chance to react. Depending on how many volleys it takes, they will have that much time to react to town portal. And if you destroy a shop and that's it, well, it's relatively inexpensive to replace. Whereas if you're forcing them to mass repair and then you actually still manage to kill their main base, for example, you might knock out their tech. You're gonna really hurt their economy. So maybe going for production buildings might, in some sense, make be more of an immediate impact. Like destroying the shop is more of a, I don't want to say more of a gamble, but the impact maybe isn't quite as large in at least in the sort of short term. Though if they town portal and they can't buy like healing potions and stuff, that certainly is going to be an immediate impact. So it's not, it's not that it doesn't have immediate impacts. It's just that, it's sort of the bigger picture of trying to, catch them without town portals and then really just have free reign with a bunch of siege units, whether it's mortars or siege engines or raiders or bat riders. It is different, and it is going to take some time to take advantage of that. But I do think it is a thing to consider. When you think how much damage it actually takes to destroy a Voodoo Lounge or a Tome of Relics. Like I said, 500 hit points, generally fortified armor, 5 base armor. Haven't calculated it out, but the siege units, of course, are going to get a 50% bonus against buildings. So if you do have mortars with upgrades, you should be able to do it in, probably 1 or 2 volleys at the most. So same with tanks or bat riders or whatever. So demolishers, meat wagons. I think that's a legitimate strategy. Again, it is very easy, especially if you're attacking somewhere alone. Like if I hit some base alone with mortars and 1 or 2 or maybe even 3 enemy play. 3 is probably a reach. They're probably not going to all 3 town portal just to defend one guy. But if 2 players town portal somewhere and I can, and they can't immediately replace their town portals or whatever, and then I just town portal to the other side of the map and we hit like 4 on one base or something, that's like sort of the ideal, like the optimal and probably rare situation where all the teammates are going to immediately be ready to do that. But if you can pull that off, you might be able to catch 2 players completely out of position. And if in the late game, if you have that situation for more than like 2 minutes, especially with like mass siege or whatever, and reasonably large army sizes, that could be the game. If for say 40 seconds to 2 minutes, 2 players are basically out of the action and they need not to be. They're sort of running around to get a town portal, they're running to the next base, or they're trying to run across the map to get back to where they need to be. That, again, like I said, depending on the army sizes and composition or whatever, it can be really just game over, or it can just be, okay, for maybe 10, 15, 20 seconds, up to a minute, sort of maybe a minute or 2 in best case scenario. We just have like a 3 on, we have a numbers advantage or something like that, a positioning advantage. Oftentimes in the late game, that is enough to win games. Like, you don't even need like amazing players. If they just have reasonably good sized armies and the opponents are trying to fight like 2v3, 2v4, out of position, they just won't be able to do it. I mean, obviously certain players that are like top tier level players, against sort of scrubs can probably fight, 1-on-3 or 2-on-4 or whatever. And, depending on the armies, you can for sure do that. But, you want to basically try to give yourself every advantage. And if it's a bunch of scrubs against a bunch of good players, well, I mean, your best hope is to at least get a numbers advantage, and maybe just grind them down through that if you can do it, or something like that. But if you can't win a 4v2, you're certainly not going to, a 4v2 battle or a 3v2 battle or whatever. You're certainly not going to be able to win a 4v4 battle, you would think. So, I mean, when I say 2v, but anyways, that's, sort of one legitimate strategy. You don't always have to knock out their shop. If you just, if you just have a fast army and they don't, maybe you have a level 6 Archmage, you can attack and then just use your ultimate and get away, and then they're gonna have to replenish. They're gonna have to spend 350 gold to get town portals if they don't have like mass teleport or whatever. So that's sort of another way to do it. Like I said, fast units. If you've got like Endurance Aura and Holy Aura, or you've got mass raiders or mass hunts, and they don't have enough to like sort of something like Ensnare or Slow to really mess you up there. So that's what's going to be on Deadlock. It's going to be mass hunts. But yeah, if you've got a fast army, you can sort of do the same thing. You can just run back and sort of make them waste town portals in some aspects. You do need to be careful though, because once they know where you're at and they know like what you're doing, they can react. If you do run into mass raiders or mass slow, then you're going to have to town portal. If you get like ambushed or surrounded or something, you won't be able to run. Similar idea. So you do have to be aware, like where the enemies are, what kind of armies they've got, to how effective that's going to be. Same with like if you've got mass bats and you're up against some undead players with mass fiends, you have to be very, very careful not to get caught out with a web somewhere and just like completely demolished. Get your army wiped or half of it. Same with Ensnare, same with Bat Riders. These things are very big threats to armies like that. If somebody is massing raiders, really any kind of army has to be very careful. Ground, air, whatever, has to be very careful trying to run around and play hit and run, because Ensnare really just shuts that down. In the hands of a competent player, mass Ensnare is really insane, because the cooldown's very short, raiders are very fast, and it works on everything. It works on heroes, it works on units, air units, ground units, what have you, and the range is pretty decent. So it can stop you from repairing, it can stop you from burrowing. So yeah, when you think about all these things, you have to be very sort of careful with running around against a player with mass raiders. They can ensnare you, pull back, wait a minute, ensnare you again, repeat. And a lot of times there's not a whole lot you can do. I mean, depending on your hero levels and what heroes you've got and what units. Yeah, you might have slow, you might have like Thunderclap or Stomp or whatever, Nova, Ensnare of your own. But a lot of armies are going to be very bad at defending that. And then, as they're ensnaring you, their allies can take notice and they can come join it and maybe get a 2 versus 1, a 3 versus 1 or whatever. In the meantime, in this game, it's going to be some really fast action. Orange is getting a little bit too aggressive. Not too aggressive per se, but his positioning, running by this tree of life, he's going to be taking a lot of shots on his hero, on his fiends. We do decent damage, though he's going to lose a fiend, so it's sort of not great. I've joined with Priestess of the Moon and Huntresses, which or a Huntress. So against archers, that's actually very good. We killed at least one archer. I don't know if we killed 2. We definitely got him to burn some Moonwell juice. That's pretty good. And now he's going to be teching. Archers are, while they're pretty good at creeping, if you get creep jag, that's going to be very bad. I've decided to come up to the top after we got pink and green to join together. That's a good army, good synergy they've got. Death Knight, Fiends, and Priest of the Moon, archers, or hunts with True Shot Aura is a good combo. True Shot Aura is going to add a lot of DPS to their army. Fiends are relatively beefy. Archers are sort of glass cannon type deals, of course, but against hunts, Fiends and Archers are very strong. But anyway, I've decided to come check for some expansions. I can do that with my mobile army. Again, mobility can be a weapon if you know what you're doing with it. Again, it was sort of lucky that Teal was expanding here. It was also sort of lucky that I think Purple. Did Purple? Yeah, Purple actually was hitting up here too. So I sort of knew what was going on. I knew we might have at least even numbers here between Teal and Red. Red's army is not that threatening. He's only got a handful of ghouls. Teal took a bunch of damage creeping this, so he doesn't really have a big army either. And Hunts can just run from what they've got. You know, even though he's got probably Sleep and he's got Stormbolt, they're not getting surrounds. I Shadow Melded this Huntress. They need to be going for surrounds. I'm going to Shadow Meld this Huntress. Could have microed a little better for sure, probably, but I do save both those Hunts at the moment. And Purple comes back. So Hunts are good in this situation against what they've got. Again, this is early game, so they don't have access to stuff like Raiders yet. Sorceresses, Dryads, we're not worried about that. So, and again, Sleep in this kind of situation doesn't do anything. I mean, if you can't surround and you have to run, I mean, it does reduce damage for a bit, but it does, the impact is very temporary with Sleep. Sleep is like a sort of risk reward. You know, you're giving up damage output on the assumption that you can take advantage with maybe Sleep surrounds, or you can keep some hero or unit sort of locked down for an entire battle. But if you're outnumbered, that's not helping at all. You know, okay, you can stop me for maybe 5 seconds with, you know, sleeping something, but again, all I have to do is attack it with my own unit or hero and it wakes up. Or I can just wait. It doesn't really matter. If you're not defending something, it doesn't really matter that you got something slept. Sort of, I mean, you're reducing damage for sure, but I'm not too concerned. Whereas if you had Carrion, you know, maybe could have killed a couple of Hunts or at least put some damage there. You know, it's Sleep is sort of situational, more so than Carrion Swarm, arguably. So, but anyway, and again, at nighttime, Sleep surrounds are not nearly as effective, especially without dust. So he's going to try to do this, and he has an expansion that's undefended as well. So this is, you know, it's a fair bet that you can, you know, 1 or 2 players are going to expand. The fact that both these players at the top did and they didn't get towers was very fortunate for us, for sure. And I get the Scout Owl. I send it around to find some more expansions. Again, you should take note of that if you think I'm like a map hacker. I'm not a map hacker. I've never been a map hacker. So yeah, the Scout Owl is just to keep an eye on what's going on at the other bases. I feel like the game is pretty much over at this point. We've got red, teal, and pink together here. So technically we are outnumbered. And I realize that the biggest threat to my army and the best targets for my hunts are actually these fiends. So I'm going to go for those. Again, the hunts take more damage from the fiends, but the fiends take more damage from the hunts. So it's sort of it's arguably about even. It looks like I maybe had more huntresses. Also, I've got True Shot Aura, almost level 2. So so yeah, I get more DPS, but he gets, wow, they killed a hunt there. Unfortunately, but yeah, I can just run from really these ghouls and stuff. It's no big deal. Teal's gonna join in. So yeah, technically we were sort of outnumbered here, but I've got a fast army, so them chasing me is not really advantageous or as threatening because of that. And in the meantime, blue and orange are joining together with to get a bunch of damage here on green. Looks like they knocked out an Ancient Allure. Orange is going to have to Town Portal. And then what's happening in the meantime? Okay, so we knocked out their expansions. Blue has got an expansion up. He's the only one that did, actually. But as far as who's winning just yet, I feel like we're winning. That Vampiric Aura drop is... Well, he does have some footmen, so we'll see what it looks like he's going to... Okay, it looks like he's going Mass Griffin, so the Vampiric Aura is not really going to be that great. They also already had a Dreadlord, so they already had Vampiric Aura in the big battles. And it looks like Red is transitioning to Fiends anyway. It still does have a decent amount of ghouls, so But yeah, it's some redundancy with that item, so that item's not a great drop for them. They're going to be creeping. I'm going to be, I think, setting up an expansion here. We'll see what happens, but yeah, we got 3 elves on our team, which is quite a lot. 2 priestess of the moon, so redundancy. Unfortunately, there. Did he go priestess second or first? Wow, I have no clue why this guy went priestess when I already had the priestess first. Like, I mean, I guess assuming we're not going to fight together all the time, maybe, but really should have picked really any other hero. Would have been better, because in the big team fights, his hero is just going to be basically redundant unless mine dies. So, um, yeah, that's a little bit annoying there. But anyways, in the priestess stats, otherwise, besides the aura, her aura is really the only. I had that lich surrounded. I don't know what's going on without my micro there, but I think I'm gonna kill him anyway. Luckily, that undead only had like 73 mana. He was like 2 mana off from saving the lich. But anyways, yeah, the priestess stats like are actually one of her weaker points compared to most other heroes. Her strength is true shot aura. It scales amazingly well. But again, if it's redundant, if you've got already have level 2 or 3 True Shot Aura, having another level 1 or 2 True Shot Aura is not going to add anything, especially when you're fighting together. So the only real advantage for the Priestess, I guess you could say the Scout Owl is, it got buffed and it can be used relatively well, but again, we already had a Scout Owl. So really the big draw and the big advantage of the Priestess, you're with the redundancy, you're not really getting anything out of it here for blue. So, but anyway, we pretty much dominate. I pick up this Razor main Medicine Man for the healing ward, and yeah, we just rolled them pretty easily. I killed the most units here. I probably killed, no, I didn't kill the most heroes actually. That belongs to Orange. He got one more than me as undead with Fiend Mask. That's to be expected. True Shot Aura does not, specifically benefit only me. So if we fight together a lot of times, you know, he's going to get a lot of benefit out of True Shot Aura. Orange is, that is. Really anyone with ranged units and heroes. So it really helps. And again, the other thing is hunts tend to be the more like tanking unit. So and with this, like with Elf Undead, it's pretty typical that Undead will be the one killing the most units if the players are, playing reasonably competently, because the range is more for Fiends, I believe, and the damage, I think, is also actually more. And just, like I said, just because the hunts are tanking most of the damage, if I lose a bunch of hunts and his Fiends are sort of alive the whole battle mostly, then after I lose my hunts, my DPS drops off immensely, whereas his is going to stay up there until he loses his units or has to run. So, and the other part is he's got nuking heroes, whereas my hero adds DPS to everything that's ranged. His nuking is going to be, it's going to be more burst damage, more targeted burst, so he can specifically kill units and heroes generally much better than me in terms of finishing them off. Sort of big picture, True Shot Aura could add probably similar amounts of damage overall, but it's not burst damage. It tends to be more spread out and more like over time. So, in some sense, it may be more efficient, since again, the other thing, it does not cost mana. So, especially in the later stages of the game, True Shot Aura could easily eclipse like Death Coil and Nova in terms of damage, perhaps, but in terms of burst damage, which again is very valuable oftentimes, because if you fight a battle that only lasts 5 to 10 seconds, 5 to 20 seconds before they run or town portal or whatever, you have these little engagements. What do you want? Do you want True Shot Aura for 5 seconds, or do you want level 3 Death Coil, level 3 Nova, or level 2 Nova, or whatever? You want the burst damage because that's gonna give you the most chance, make it more likely that you actually get kills there if the engagement is small. Now, if the engagement is like 100 food armies or 70 food armies, a bunch of ranged units, mass attack upgrades on those ranged units, maybe Bloodlust, maybe Unholy Frenzy, maybe Endurance Aura, whatever, Kodo Aura, whatever. Those things. Well, I guess the synergy. I don't think Kodo Aura and True Shot Aura like multiply the effects. But anyways, the attack upgrades are for sure going to be synergized well with True Shot Aura, and the attack speed stuff like Bloodlust and Unholy Frenzy and Endurance Aura, those things, and Gloves of Haste, those things are going to like have a synergistic sort of multiplicative impact with True Shot Aura. So at that point, you very well could, with 1 or 2 volleys, with True Shot Aura, especially level 3 True Shot Aura, you could get, let's see, Death Coil level 3 is going to do 300 damage to a single target. So you basically need to do, for level 3 True Shot Aura, you basically need to do like 1,000 damage, have 1,000 range damage from, right, or, well, not, maybe a little bit more than that, but you need about, let's see, if you have 12,000 damage, 30% of that is going to be 400. So if you have 1,000, it's going to be 30% will be 300. So yeah, that's true. Yeah, sorry, I was thinking sort of overthinking there for a second. But yeah, you need 1,000 damage of range damage or range damage units with True Shot Aura level 3 to actually equal 1 Death Coil in terms of damage output. And then, again, this is ignoring armor and hero spell damage reduction and all that stuff. So it's just raw numbers. It's getting into sort of too minute detail to go further, but yeah, 1,000 damage. How likely is that? Footmen do like I think 10 or so. Generally, like Rifles and Fiends are I think sitting around 14, 15 maybe, and that's without upgrades. With upgrades, it's probably closer to 18 maybe or something. I think Wind Riders are somewhere around 20. I think the Frost Worms are one of the higher ones. They're up there around, I can't remember if it was like 30 or 34, or 35. I forget. Obviously attack upgrades and Bloodlust and a whole bunch of other things impacted as well. So, but anyway, just they're all units. It's like how many units would it take to, like, what is a 70 food army? What's the DPS there? Obviously it depends on the units and stuff, but it's not a number I have off the top of my head. Let's see, let's say you have 60 food worth of fiends. So it's gonna be 20 fiends. If they do 15 DPS, let's just do this on a calculator because I'm not really a big fan of trying to do that in my head. I guess it's 300 for 20 fiends. So it's a long ways off from 1,000. And that's, assuming my number 15 is reasonably close to the fiend DPS. So if you have 4 armies of 60 fiends, which again is pretty unlikely, that's probably gonna have a mixture of some other stuff in there. And 60 fiends is a lot. Or sorry, 20 fiends per person is a lot. You don't really often see players running around with 20 fiends generally. At that point, they will probably have branched out into more sort of effective units like mixing in frost worms and statues and stuff. But yeah, this is sort of maybe a high-end estimate. If every single player had, let's say you had 3 players with 20 fiends, and then the other player had a bunch of other stuff, maybe melee units or something. That's going to get you close to 1,000. That's going to put you at 900. And again, that's assuming my 15 was correct. and that's from one volley. Now, if you had 2 volleys, you would need, you would not need that many. You would, you would go ahead and multiply that number 300 by 2, 600, and then you would only need like, 2 armies of 20 fiends or 40 fiends. We'll just say, we'll just forget the number of armies for a second. We'll just say if a team has about 40 fiends and they do 2 volleys of attack with level 3 True Shot Aura, that's gonna, and again, assuming my numbers are correct, which is another thing, but that's gonna put you at about 1200 damage, and you can get two volleys in 5 seconds, I think. So, and again, then you have cooldown for Death Coil, which again is going to be more than 5 seconds. I want to say it's like, honestly, I'm not sure how much. What the cooldown is silly. I think it's 7 seconds though. So yeah, if we just do 7 seconds, can you get 2 volleys in 7 seconds? I imagine you can. 3 is maybe pushing it, but for sure you can seemingly get 2 volleys. Okay, it's only 6 seconds, so it's not quite 7. So yeah, that would be sort of a situation where you are, perhaps doing just as well with either True Shot or Death Coil. Now, that's assuming all of your units are attacking. That's assuming that, like I said, it's all ranged units. Again, in this specific example, that's all fiends. Let me go ahead and actually just do the full crunch here and tell you what the DPS of the fiends are specifically. So, yeah, crit fiends do 28.5 damage without any attack upgrades or anything else, and that's the raw damage. And they have a cooldown of 2. So yeah, I was actually really close. It's 14.25 with no attack upgrades. When you get full attack upgrades, which you might expect to have when when your ally has level 3 True Shot Aura, and when you have that big of an army, that's going to put you really close to 20. 19.5. So I was actually my estimates were actually really close, which sort of makes me feel pretty good about making semi-accurate comments on the DPS there. But and yeah, 2 seconds, I guess you can get about probably like three volleys on 6 seconds. I mean, it might be really close because I don't know, you have to be attacking at every single. You're basically just staying there and attacking to make it like come right at 6 seconds, I think. But I guess. But anyways, that's sort of what I would say about True Shot Aura versus undead stuff, and again that's sort of a rabbit hole. But and again, 20 fiends is a massive amount of fiends, or 40 or whatever number you're going to go for there. So that's a lot of those numbers are really high. And again, level 3 True Shot Aura, obviously it scales way down. Level 1 is only 10%. Level 3 is 30%. So if you only have level 1, you have to adjust that. And again, same with Death Coil. Death Coil goes 200, 400, 600 on damage. So it's a big jump down. Basically the same, 200 to 600 is the same sort of multiple. It's 3 times 200 to get up to level 3 Death Coil, whereas it's 3 times 10% to get up to level 3 True Shot Aura. So yeah, that's sort of what I will say. I guess the other point is armor works much better at like reducing obviously physical attacks, whereas spells are only going to be reduced by hero spell damage reduction, or certain items, or something like anti-magic shield would do it. Eludes Grace, for example, pretty obscure thing, but on archers they get a magic damage reduction percentage. But But yeah, that's so if the enemy has a bunch of armor upgrades, obviously that's going to reduce the impact of physical attack damage, which is all the damage that you get from True Shadow Roll will be physical attack damage, or well, it sounds weird to say physical and then magic attack damage, but um, spell damage. I guess I should have said it earlier, but anyways, that's that's sort of an advantage of spell damage is it ignores armor. So if they mass armor, it doesn't really matter if you've got no coil, fork lightning, whatever, blizzard, uh, lightning shield, all these things. It does not matter that they have maybe mass armor, maybe units with high armor, maybe frost armor or devotion aura. You cut right through all that stuff with spell damage. Um, so yeah, that's sort of a very obscure point. If they have really high armor stuff, maybe they've got inner fire. One thing to sort of counter that would just be a lot of nuke damage. Like if your spells can just decimate units, maybe not so much heroes because they get a natural spell damage reduction, but units, that's going to be really strong. And again, if you're thinking about where to aim your spell damage, certainly on high armored targets might make a lot of sense. It's probably why something like Blizzard could potentially be useful against like Knights and Bears to some degree, Abominations, really anything that has a lot of armor. But buildings, I think buildings have a natural. Uh, they take less damage from Blizzard and Rain of Fire and stuff like that. So that's a little annoying, but it's fair probably because it would probably just be completely imbalanced if there was no damage reduction there from Blizzard on buildings because they're so crucial. But anyways, that's going off on some tangents here. I think I'm going to end this audio here. That's been quite a number of games. Hopefully you got some interesting sort of information. It was entertaining. The strategies used, I used a bunch of different strategies. There was no real theme here. It was just, I guess the theme was like 4v4 games, random team. These were ladder games. They weren't custom games, so I didn't know any of these players. Well, I'd seen some of the players before, but as far as like knowing them or whatever, not super familiar with them or anything like that. So yeah, but I thought the games were went pretty well. The different strategies worked out, as fairly well. Going ledge first, that was a dicey game. That didn't actually start out very well, but everything else though, the huntresses with the priestess, the scout owl, I utilized those things relatively well. With the mortars, I actually sort of messed up gambling trying to get the town hall when he can repair with like 15 workers, and he did repair with 15 workers, so he was able to keep his base up while they sort of ripped apart my mortars. That's really the risk of going like mass mortars. They're a glass cannon type unit. Their range is incredible. Their DPS, especially against buildings and unarmored targets, and especially if you get fragmentation shard and some attack upgrades, can be amazing. The downside is their hit points and the armor value is very poor, and they're not very fast moving either. They don't have any kind of like evasive abilities that you can get like burrow or whatever. I guess you could get adept sorceresses for invisibility. That would be maybe a thing to go for, try to sneak around. But other than that, they're gonna be sort of in trouble if the opponent like gets melee units around them. They've got some spells or whatever. They can just kill them relatively quickly. But again, a glass cannon is about how I would describe them. So, but yeah, we did sort of force them to ping pong around with that, in that game and in some of the other games, and probe for weaknesses and sort of exploit that. And again, that's something that Scout Owl can do. Like I always thought Scout Owl was a little bit underrated, though the mana cost was pretty prohibitive before. I mean, you could cast it a few times. It was 100 mana. It wasn't like 125 mana, but you're on an agility hero, and you don't really want to draining Moonwells if that's how you regenerate your mana using spells with the priestess. is not very efficient. It's less efficient than healing. The heal rate or the mana cost to regenerate mana is higher, or it's more costly to regenerate mana than hit points with a Moonwell. So you don't really, and you can't really control it as far as like if you want to use a Moonwell on a Priestess of the Moon or on a unit with mana or a hero with mana. There's not like, and it would be very, very nice if there was like a button to say regenerate only hit points, regenerate only mana, or even if you could further customize it, like, hey, give me 50 mana and 100 hit or 200 hit points or whatever. That'd be like a really, I think an all or nothing, all mana or all hit points button would be. It would be a buff to be able to do that with Elf, because you could say you could just never regenerate mana since it's, or if it's not crucial, and just use clarity potions or something like that. If you wanted to, or just naturally regenerate the mana, because popping off 100 mana every time and then using a Moonwell is going to be very, very bad generally. So but yeah, now the scout only costs 50 mana. I don't know if they changed the cooldown or not. It seems like it cools down really quick. Maybe it always did that. Especially even at level 1, it's like you can, it's a massive mana reduction going from 100 to 50. That is a huge change. I mean, you never really, you didn't really see that very often in high level games, because you can scout without using a hero skill generally pretty well. I mean, it is going to take some effort, and perhaps, there is cost to using skeleton scouts or militia or wisp or whatever. There's always a cost, even something like footmen and stuff. It's a risk. They could have entangle, they could have anything to kill it or do the damage or whatever. But yeah, whole hero skill is arguably can be a very big investment. Now on the priestess, losing flaming arrow as an ability is not that huge of a problem, because it's one of the lower tier sort of worse ability, not worse per se, but it's really it's below average, I would say, in terms of power level. You only get 10 extra damage, 20 extra damage, 30 extra, and it costs 10 mana. You look at the other arrow effects, for example, their effects are arguably better. Like, you get damage and potentially a summoned unit with Black Arrow. You get extra damage and slow movement and attack speed with Frost Arrow. And I don't know if those abilities cost 10 mana or not, but anyway, though, generally those abilities I would prefer than Flaming Arrow. The damage should probably be a bit more, or the mana cost a bit less, to sort of keep it in line with some of those other ones. Trying to think of any other arrow effects. It's really Incinerate. You could say is kind of similar, but Incinerate is also like one of the not amazing ones. But anyways, that it's not really a big loss to lose Flaming Arrow as an ability. Whereas with other heroes, like if you were having a Panda, putting a point in Drunken Brawler instead of Drunken Haze or Breath of Fire would be a pretty big, sort of cost. Same with like a Tinker. If you drop 1 point into Cluster Rockets, unless you're doing it specifically to interrupt channeling ultimates, that's really the only time I can see that being like useful. Or if they had like, a whole team of players with channeling heroes, like Blizzard and Archmage using Blizzard, Blood Mage using Flame Strike, Pit Lord using Rain of Fire, something like that. Yeah, okay, maybe Cluster Rockets could have some impact there, but other than that, it would be a big cost just to put a random point, even just one single point into like Cluster Rockets would argue wouldn't be very good, honestly. But anyways, not ideal. But with the Priestess, it's not as big of a cost, honestly. I'd much rather have just unstoppable scouting, like the only cost being mana. It is a cost, but 50 mana is like one of the lowest mana cost for a spell. I mean, there's obviously ones that are lower, um, yeah, it's relatively low, and so you can cast it a whole bunch of times, even without using, you know, Moonwells. You know, you can generally cast it a bunch, and it's, like I said, it's not something they can stop if you just have a Scout Owl follow their army. They, for the duration, they can't really stop it. Now, if they're fast enough to outrun it, okay, sure, but they can't ensnare it, they can't dispel it, they can't kill it with damage. It's invincible. So, and it flies over trees, unlike some other scouting like shades or whatever. It can fly over trees, so, you know, the terrain is not like a downside or an obstacle for the Scout Owl. So, you know, you can scout relatively well with just, you know, just a Scout Owl, and in ways that other scouting just can't do. Like if you're scouting with a worker or a unit or even a shade, there are vulnerabilities. You know, they have to, with ground units, you've got to worry about the terrain, and they can generally kill units. And even a shade, if they have a detection, they can just kill it, and then, you know, they've gained experience. You've lost a scout. And they can see it. Well, I mean, they can see the Scout Owl as well, but sometimes, I mean, if you're over trees and stuff, you can actually sort of be a little bit sneaky with it. But anyways, you know, I do like the Scout Owl, and that, again, going from 100 to 50 mana is enough to make it, like, even that much more attractive. You know, I don't have to worry about, oh, I've cast it 3 times, that's 300 mana. That's a really poor play with Elf. Now I don't want to use the Moonwells with the Priestess, you know, blah, blah, blah. But 50 mana, yeah, I cast it 3 times, and it's only 150 mana then. So it's way less inefficient in terms of the mana. You know, if I just cast it once or twice, and then use a Moonwell, okay, you know, it's still arguably inefficient, but not nearly as bad. So yeah, it's, you know, it's like, how long does it take to regenerate that mana? You know, normally, well, half as long as it otherwise would have, because it is half as much. So yeah, that's, you know, what I'll say there. But anyway, that's a lot of going off on some tangents there. You know, let me know in the comments or whatever. Shoot me a message if you have some specific strategies you'd like to see. If you got any suggestions, if you want to see a whole new game type, custom games. I'm not really super experienced in most. I mean, there's like a crazy number of custom games, to be honest. Like not regular, like sort of melee type games, but like more, you know, RPG, or, you know, these goofy like tag games. And you know, you of course had Dota, and you know, as like a CG, you know, all kinds of interesting custom games out there. Uther Party, you know, is an interesting one for sure. Footman Frenzy, you know, Battleships, just too many. I can't even remember like all the custom. I mean, a bunch of tower, what is it? Tower defense games. Um, you know, some of them are fun for sure. I mean, obviously, if you got your own, if you got friends playing, you know, it's not just random people. It's probably going to be a little bit more fun. Um, but yeah, they're fun games. They're fun games out there. I just don't tend to play them very much, as opposed to like ladder games. You know, some of it is, you know, each one is going to have a learning curve. So any kind of game I haven't played a bunch, you know, is it's being compared against like my skill level at ladder, which I've been doing for like 10 years or more. So, you know, you've got to, and definitely, you know, played way more games. So I'm way more familiar with like all the interactions and everything. Whereas even with Dota, like probably, I don't know if it was the most, if there was a custom game I played the most, but honestly, even with Dota, I'm nowhere near like I'm total noob level. Like, you know, I've only played a handful of heroes. You know, I don't even know if I've played 100 Dota games. Probably not. I would guess honestly, which is like, you know, and again, not just playing it, but like talking about it, reading about it, compared to Warcraft. I've read a lot of stuff on Warcraft threads. I've watched, watched replays, I watched streams, stuff like that before. So it's like, I've never really watched, at least specifically to the Warcraft one. I've seen a couple of little, streams of like the standalone game, like League of Legends and Dota and Dota 2, but um, but yeah, specific to the Warcraft one, and again, I'm assuming there's a lot of differences between those. I haven't really seen or read a bunch. I've read a very, very little amount, like, one or two, like, articles or something, threads or whatever, strategy guides. I say strategy guides, like, sort of builds or whatever. But it very, very, very little, and that was like one hero, like, some item list or something to get for one hero. It's like, that's it, So I'm like total noob level at that stuff. So it's like, to sort of, it's just not as quite as appealing to say, okay, I'm going to jump in here and just be a total noob, you know, probably get a bunch of players hating, because I'm so bad and everything like that. So, it's not that I won't do it. It's not that I haven't done it before. It's just that it's going to be like what I can like talk about and, say about it, and, even watching it is probably going to be not super helpful. You'd be much better off watching somebody that's like high level player, or at least more knowledgeable than I could be. And I'll just, maybe it's more entertaining. I'll just be like getting killed a bunch of times and like not knowing, not I'm be totally clueless or whatever about a lot of the stuff going on. But anyways, if you got any of those suggestions or whatever, hit me up in the comments, or shoot me a message, and I will try to respond to that. And if it sounds like some interesting stuff to do, I could, of course, oblige the requests and sort of branch out into that stuff. But at any rate, this is going to be the end of the audio. ScryMind signing out.